Welcome everybody to the Fort Hueneme Historical Society Museum.
Yes.
If you have a cell phone, you might want to turn the ringer off. I already turned mine off because it rang a little bit earlier. Let's see, oh, there comes Rich Rollins is in. Oh, hi, I saw you last night. Today, we have the great honor to have the board president from the Pleasant Valley Historical Society. And she is going to share with you the value of hoarding, right? And it's kind of interesting because Larry understands the value of hoarding. Look what he's done here with everything, you know, and everything on the wall here came out of a box at some point in time that was stuck in a corner and sat there for years, okay? So today's topic is the Impossible Women of Pleasant Valley, and the interesting thing about it is that Joy Todd found some stuff, and it was organized by number, and she started to say, well, wait a minute, you know, unless you know what corresponds with a number, you know, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, she started on a project organizing all the stuff over there by category, and in doing so, she's come up with this wonderful discovery about the Impossible Women of Pleasant Valley. And she's going to share with you what that means, and it's quite interesting, and enjoy the talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Not everybody's interested in ladies, especially that have lived in the past. And these ladies are all unique for different reasons. But the first one I'm going to talk about is a lady who was born in New Jerusalem. You know where that is?
El Rio.
El Rio.
El Rio, really? El
Rio is New Jerusalem. It was named by the Cohen brothers, actually. And the Cohen brothers had 3 bars on 4 corners. I always thought that was sort of cool. So she was a lifelong resident of the county. She was born in 1896, I believe. And she was one of the first residents of Callejas. And she moved there when she was like 2 or 3. And Callejas is Camarillo. And the reason that it's not called Callejas today is because in 1899, the post office came to town from Springdale, which is gone. And the post office, they turned in the name and they looked at it and they said, we can't spell it, we can't pronounce it, find something else. At which point they went and asked the Camarillo brothers, not just Adolfo, but the brothers, if they could name it Camarillo, and the post office could deal with that. They did the same sort of thing to Oxnard. That's how H.T. Oxnard's name came to be on the city. It was like sucre dulce, the sweet water or something they wanted, and yeah, that didn't fly either. So the post office made us Camarillo, and so she was born there. She was an impossible lady in a lot of ways. She was the second oldest of 7. She had to leave school to support her siblings. Her father died before the 7th child was born, so she basically was raised without a father. At one time, she was sent to get the doctor because her mother was having a baby, and she went to the horse barn. Oh yeah, this is so cool. She went to the horse barn, and there was only one old thing left, and she couldn't get it to do anything. And she was trying to get the horse to go. And finally, she just started yelling at it, which she had heard other people yell at it, and it responded.
Excuse me, I had to step out and to get a call, and I didn't get the person's name they're talking about.
I haven't told you.
That was a quiz.
Very good. So who am I talking about? It's not a daily. Anyway, so sorry. That's okay. There's a reason. So she didn't. She started yelling what she had heard, doesn't speak to the horse perked up. She got on the horse, went and saved the baby because she got the doctor. So everything was quite glorious. So her name is Adele Hernandez, but she did not grow up speaking Spanish. And this is a picture of her in the 30s, 40s actually. And so it was when she read Tortilla Flat that she realized that the actual translation of the words that she was saying, actually. She didn't finish high school, but she attended a design school in San Francisco, and she did the same thing that they do today. She had to make a wedding dress out of paper. They still do that in design school, and this was in the 20s. So the other thing that she did was go to accounting school. So Adele was raised on a farm. It wasn't a big farm. And I'll pass this around, but this is a picture of her house, which is no more. Found this in archives. And her mother would create a garden wherever she went when her father was alive, when Adele was little. But when her mom moved to Camarillo and they lived on in this house, which is where the freeway is now, actually, and they moved that house to another corner after the freeway came, which was kind of an interesting thing, which is very common. But Adele had married a Flynn. Yeah. Adele herself married a Flynn. And she was a very resourceful person, but Jimmy Flynn was not. And he was very happy to be with whatever woman was around. He just ended up leaving, and they were actually married as man and wife for just a couple of years. Adele had one daughter, Adele Flynn. This is where things kind of get confused. So Adele Flynn, too, her daughter, I know, and is still alive, and so I was able to get a lot of information about her mom and to understand her mom. And it's kind of fun to talk to someone who actually knew the person. And she has great respect for her mom. But her mom had to find a way to survive because the husband was gone and he was off with the Flynns, and the Flynns didn't have much to do with her. One of the things that we found was that there was a little tiny snippet of an article that said that she, after a year of marriage, she had come home to Camarillo. And it was put in by the Flynns for some reason. It was such a strange thing, and it was almost not a nice thing. But anyway, so Adele had to get milk for little Adele. They didn't have cows or anything like that. They ate all the things in the garden, and they ate chicken like up the gazooey. And so Adele got a job working 3 hours twice a week, 3 hours a day at the local library, which had been moved from its original position to on what's now Lewis Road, Somas Road. And that little right attached to the post office. That money that she earned bought the milk for her daughter. And so this is the start of when you see this incredible resourcefulness of Adele. Now we're back to a senior, Adele Senior. So she married James in 29, and little Adele was born, I think, in 31, and Jimmy was gone by 32. So she lived with her mom. During the Depression, which this is the Depression, it wasn't terrible in Camarillo. It wasn't as horrible because we were like other areas in our county, we were insulated. So because we were little farming people. Little, you know, you had your own garden. I could feed tomatoes to the world at my house. So the garden produced food for the table, and so in 1932 she got the library job. She was so excited about this. She loved learning. Remember, she didn't graduate from high school. She loved learning, and she was a good bookkeeper. She was a very smart woman, but she doesn't have degrees or anything. She just is a smart lady. And Adele would work making clothes for other families, and that's how she could make a dress by just looking at it. Adele Jr., Adele Stubing said that her mom made her own dress, and it was off of the cover of a Vogue magazine. She just looked at it and made it. But she was always interested in design, and so she could fix and mend or whatever. And 3 or 4 days a week, she would go to Oxnard, and she worked for the Blackstocks, and she also worked for the Camarillos, which were local. She also portraits. A number of the families locally would hire her to make and to alter clothes. So Adolfo wanted his girls to look like they were wearing skirts, but they rode horses astride. And he did not think that was ladylike. Adolfo was a very controlling man. Carmen Camarillo Jones, you're familiar? She was the last of his daughters to live, actually, and had the ranch house up to the end. She wanted to marry a Protestant, and her father would not allow it. Her father died in 1958, and I know because 59 is when she got married, and that's when she became Camarillo Jones. But he said that he would disown her if she married a Protestant. He was gone. Anyway, so Adele designed skirts and dresses that appeared to be dresses, but were really pants. And we have some of those at our museum, and the ranch house uses them quite often. But she would shorten hems, she would alter things so that they would fit what somebody wanted it to be, repairing clothes. But Adolfo was very, very conscious of price and cost of things, and so he was constantly having Adele do all of his repair work. So when the girls would wear something out somewhere, she would fix it or pull seams. One of the things that I found with the old clothes is the thread does not hold up as well. So I am constantly repairing seams on the dresses that belong to the Camarillo ladies, because just the weight of the satin that they would use. She would clean them. They didn't have cleaners around like we have. And she would use a gasoline product and had to be done outside and everything to clean the satin and the things that couldn't be washed. Let's go back to the library business, because this is kind of interesting. In Camarillo, there's a sacred and holy name, and it's Ornarinda Jones. Yeah, didn't mean anything to me either. But Ornarinda Jones was the principal of Pleasant Valley School for eons. I don't know exactly why. But it was the only elementary school in the whole area. But Adele went and worked with Ornarinda to build up a library that would allow the kids to come to the library. And every Wednesday, they would rotate. They would go for 2 weeks. They checked out their books, and that way the kids had access, because they didn't have school libraries. And that was Adele's idea, working with Ornarinda. And there were books that couldn't be checked out, but they needed in those days there was such a thing as an Encyclopedia Britannica or Americana, and so you wanted research, and they were supposed to sit there and they couldn't. And their parents needed them to come home, and they could work at night, and the book wasn't supposed to go out. So Adele worked out a way that she had kind of a barter deposit type thing. And she would have the parents write a check and leave the check, and then when they came back, they got the check back. And the check could be used multiple times, didn't care, wasn't a problem. But that way they felt that responsibility to bring it back. She wasn't gonna get in trouble because it had broken up the set and the kids could learn. I thought that was really cool. She was also a singer, and she sang in the choir until she got asthma too bad and couldn't breathe well. But she was at the St. Mary's Choir, was part of it. She made and mended all the vesters, the robes, and was part of the Altar Guild, president, and would sing in Juan Camarillo's little side, the side of St. Mary's, and you look at over on the left, there's a room there, and that was designed by Juan Camarillo for Juan Camarillo's collections of baskets and things, and it had a grand piano. It was used for recitals. It was really a cool place. Adele would sing there, and then one of the Camarillo ladies would play for her, and she would sing. That was cool. So, along the way, she taught swimming to 4-H girls with Mrs. Stan Daly's mother. She organized cotillion. Oh Lord, do I hate it. Remember cotillion? Anyway, they don't have that anymore. It's good. Made graduation clothes for girls and children who graduated from PVH but couldn't afford clothes. Warner Brenda Jones, that principal again, would pay for the fabric so that she could make the clothes for the kids to graduate in. She folded bandages for the Red Cross to send overseas during World War II. The project was done at the state hospital with the patients wailing in the background. She provided board of trustees for the state hospital who were working but waiting for a place to live. And so what you should understand, these trustees are the people that work there. There were more people working at the state hospital than the whole city of Camarillo. And they had no housing for them. And so they would have rooms in almost all the homes, would try to have an extra room for the people, and they might stay in one house and then be there for 4 days, and then they'd go back to their other where they were living until they could find a place. And they, of course, were in Oxnard and Port Hueneme, but Camarillo took a lot of the trustees, which is what they were called at that point. Let's see. I think this is a pretty exciting life for a lady who never graduated from high school, took classes, did whatever she could to survive and raise her daughter, who went to UCLA and graduated with honors and was a teacher locally and was a princess at the football or whatever. So anyway, so this is what Adele looks like. We have pictures here too that are kind of interesting. She works in the lima bean factory. We have pictures of her in the lima bean factory. These are all things we just found. Now the last thing though that makes her kind of special, in 1964, the city of Camarillo was formed. It's exciting, yeah. Earl Joseph was the first mayor, and Earl Joseph was really a neat man, very, very humble man. He went to Adele, didn't graduate from high school, and said, I want you to be the treasurer of the city. And she said, sure, no problem. And you will be paid. And she said, oh no, I don't need to be paid. And he said, you will be paid because all the city employees are paid. She was the first treasurer of the city. She took the city government from meeting in the Pleasant Valley Auditorium to its site where there's now an apartment complex and the building of the new facility. All of that was covered by this lady as treasurer, and the city always was in the black.
She Adele
Very
Flynn?
frugal lady, sorry.
Was she Adele Flynn then?
This is Adele Flynn, only Adele Flynn, not the mother, the daughter. This is the mother that was born in 1996. And she died at the age of 81, and she was still the treasurer.
No kidding.
Yeah. And I think
What, so that article is what page?
this is April 26th of 1981.
And she was the treasurer then?
No.
And she was still the treasurer in 1981.
Wow.
So that's this lovely little lady, and she was like they say here in this obituary that she was a librarian for 33 years, and then it just goes over what I basically told you. But so many things in her life could have been defeat, and they turned into incredible success. And I just think that she was an amazing lady. And when I was doing research for this project and I talked to her daughter came to the first time I ever did this talk. And Adele came to me and she said, "You knew things about my mom that I didn't." And she was a wonderful daughter. She was very dedicated to her mom. So I took that as a real compliment. So there's pictures of her stacking books in the library. Yes.
So my family moved to Camarillo in 1970 perhaps. I know there was one stop sign there, but anyways, growing up in Camarillo, it was interesting because everyone would hang out at the library. Now I think I know why. And it was just kind of like, oh yeah, we would, sometimes it was an excuse, but a lot of the kids in high school would hang out at the library.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you make it an inviting place, then it is. All right, hoarding. Here's something for hoarding, because Adele's mom, Adele Stubing's mom, saved everything that belonged to Adele. And this is a child infant hygiene check in 1931 for Adele. And I just think it's that all these little treasures that are things that we don't necessarily realize the value of until you start putting them together. This is a little article about her, who kept the fact of her marriage to James Flynn secret for almost 3 months, returned to Camarillo. I thought it was snooty, so I asked Adele, her daughter, and so she was telling me, yeah, the Flynns didn't like her. She wasn't good enough for the Flynns. So. But that's my first impossible lady. The other ladies are all of the same family. And just going through everything. Just a second, here we go. And actually it was only yesterday when I was making sure I had things to bring here that I found these photographs of them. These are timely photographs, and so I'll get to that. So there are these 4 girls. They're all the daughters of E.W. Daly. And this was their farm, which is where Las Cosas and the freeway is. This is what you were talking about. This is their farm. Marie Callender's is where the house sat. And it was an idyllic place to grow up. The 4 girls, their father worshipped and adored them, each one. And what drew me to them was stories I heard to some extent. But the thing that ties them to the county is this. How many of you have ever read Beans, Feats, and Babies by Mulhart? Yeah, this is like the definitive one around there. Well, the interesting thing is the Beans, Feats were the Daly family. The babies were William Reinhardt Livingston. MD. And this Dr. Livingston, I presume, was born in 1870 in Hueneme. And he studied at the University of Chicago, medicine, and went to Germany, where he learned what was called twilight sleep. And that's the babies,
Childbirth.
because mothers came from far and near to have babies in what turned out to be Oxnard. And he built the first St. John's just because he had so many babies coming. But yes,
Originally it was called Lying-In Hospital.
what?
Originally it was called the Lying-In Hospital.
The Lying-In Hospital, that's right. Yeah, it was. Now we're on the third of them, the Lying-Ins. But that was what would bring a lot of people to the area. He died in 1952, and that's something to remember. And he married a Daly. So I want you to understand him because that'll come together. So, Nellie Daly was born in 1890. She died in 1969. This is so cool. So there. I just found this also, I just think this is such a roll. She married briefly in 1946 to a man named Ed Farrell. And I took it out so I'd get to it easily from her. The reason this is the way it is that all these ladies are organized separately in my folders, and so I'm very careful to make sure they stay where they live. But here's I apologize for this. Well, she married Ed Farrell, and this is what she looked like, but not when she married Ed Farrell. This is her as a young girl, and I think she's a fairly attractive girl. And this is Nellie Daly with Ed Farrell. And I will trust you people to be careful, it's in an archival sleeve, but you have to check the hat out.
It's a fun
You
day.
have to see this because in a million years I never would have let this go through history. But anyway, so there's Nellie Daly. Ruth Daly was next, and she was the one who was a Livingston, 1893 to 1955, another important thing. She married William Reinhardt Livingston, doctor, in 1923 at the age of 30. It was a second marriage. They had no children. And they lived in the area and went and did everything. He was, I want to say 30 years her senior. He had 2 children by his first marriage, and it's another thing that's kind of an interesting thing. The next one was Bernice Gastel. Bernice Daly Gastel. She married John Gastel, a local farmer. And she was born in 1899 and died in 1954 of a cerebral hemorrhage. And the last was, the youngest, was Gladys Daly Kaufman, who was married to Raymer Kaufman. And you'll come to know her. So, these ladies were raised by E.W. to be very refined, sophisticated ladies of their time. Their mother and the girls spent a ton of time crocheting. And that's why I brought these, because these ladies, for probably 15 years, took the cake at the fair for table decorations, crocheting. We have crocheting of theirs that is amazing. It's just, they bought lace in France, had it sent here, and then assembled it into huge, beautiful collars. These are what the original fair ribbons look like. This is 1916, and that's what the ribbon was. And this is 1920. That's what the fair ribbon was. But look at the intricacy of this stuff. Yeah. And people say, oh, no, that's not crocheting. It is crocheting. They also did tatting, but this is actual crocheting. So I just brought this as a sample so you could see what kind of detail. So what do they have to do? They read books, they wrote recipe books, they wrote how to knit books, they wrote how to crochet books. They, as a little group, did everything a refined woman of the time had. There are tons of these little tiny snippets from 1916, 1919 of the parties that they had and who came to the party, and it's a who's who of the Pleasant Valley. And that's one of the things that makes them just so delightful. Someone would look at this and say, good grief, this is somebody having tea. Who cares? Well, we care because we can trace all those people and how they interacted, which was really cool. The dailies were very integrated and very progressive, and they're among the people who got the bridge to go across the Santa Clara River because they got stuck in the mud too many times. So that's kind of an overview of their growing up, and I don't want to bore you. So we'll go to Nellie first because she's the oldest, and that's the one you have the picture of. My impression of Nellie is created somewhat by her correspondence and by the correspondence in return from her attorney, Todd Durrell. Guy was a saint. But Nellie, this little delicate thing that you see there, picked fights with everybody, honest to heaven. So she had a fight with the Las Cosas Country Club because she was one of the founding members and she didn't play golf and she didn't want to pay all the money that a golf person would. And that they had charged her too much, and when and all this correspondence is in here. And you just get a flavor from her and them. And then she had, oh my gosh, so she had promised when she sold the land, the farmland, that they would save the house. That was one of the deals. And the builder that bought it said they would save the house. So she stayed there until her mother died. They rented out the land. She fought with the guy who was renting the land from the people who really owned it for half of what he made. When in reality, she was a renter for free.
Yeah.
And so we have all this correspondence. And she had another farmer on some of her land who, for 3 years in a row, his electric pump that's on the land that's supposed to be maintained because they're getting irrigation was struck by lightning. And her response, fix it. And so over to the attorney, who tries to give her a reason to response to why perhaps she should fix it, because if he leaves, it still needs to be fixed and it belongs to the land. Well, Nellie wasn't always happy with some of the responses she got, but that's what it was. Let's see, what is it? Oh yes, Jan's Corporation. You don't mess with the Jan's Corporation.
No.
Nellie did. So Nellie lived up on Crestview when she left the house. She went up to Crestview on the backside over what became Monte Vienda. And that was all Jan's land. And so first she wanted Lot 1. And that was fine, and all paperwork got done, and then she changed her mind. No, she decided that she wanted Lot 3. So the Jan's Corporation went back and said, okay, we'll do this and this and this. And part of that land had originally been hers, so she felt that they needed to bend over for her. They bent over 3 times, at which point they said, you're done. And she ended up with the last one.
So Jan's land is where, in Thousand Oaks?
No, it's the same Jan's, but the Jan's Corporation is the one that built Crestview Water Company, which is why they put in that water so that they could develop all of what is the estates, everything from Spanish Hills over to the Heights. That's all Jan's land.
I think that was Larry, wasn't it?
The jams were everywhere. They definitely are the Thousand Oaks one, but they had a huge imprint in the city of Camarillo. And I didn't know that until I thought this either, so.
What street did she live on?
She lives just off of Crestview going down, and I can't remember the name of the street, but we had to, Liz Daly, Mhm. No, I don't think, I can't remember either. I've been up there, but they're very large lots and single-story houses, and they look out over Las Posas Valley, not this direction. So Nellie was 55 when she married poor Ed Farrell, and had the flowers coming out of her head. And so for the next about 15 years or so, she was very involved with the sisters, and that's where she went back to. So Ruth, who was the next one, married William Reinhardt Livingston when she was 30 in 1923. He had 2 children, and this becomes interesting too. Robert and Susan, I think her name was. And he died in 1952. He had a boat that was up in Santa Barbara, and they used to go sailing and go jaunts for weeks at a time on their boat down to San Diego or whatever, it was a sailboat. And then they took trips around the country, and she would write home, which we have, details of the whole trip. So that it was kind of interesting. So he died in 1952. Bernice, who is the next one, married John Gastel, who was a rancher in Camarillo and had a stroke and died. And the youngest was Gladys Daly. And Gladys married Raymer Kaufman. And he was a rancher, had a lot of land up off Central, El Rio, and over to parts of Ventura. Big ranch. In May of 1953, they were returning from a trip to Sacramento, and they were struck by a truck, and he was killed outright in 1953. And she was very badly injured. It was about 3 months before she got out of the hospital, and then she had to recover. So this is really sad. It was all the girls, with the exception of Nellie, all of the girls seemed to have married for love. So we're going to back up just a little bit so you can understand how this goes together. Those are our players. E.W., their father, passed away. Happened. And he had an estate, I think it was close to $1 million, something like that. He divided it between the girls, each of the girls, and they knew that they were to take care of their mom, part of the deal. When Bernice Gastel died, John Gastel gave her inheritance back to the sisters. He did not keep it. He gave it back to the sisters. He later remarried, and he had 4 children. None of the girls had children. None of them. So Bernice is gone. So the next one is Ruth Daly Livingston. And she and Dr. Livingston had a wonderful life, and everything was fine. It was just a wonderful life for them. But he was a lot older than she was, and he died, I believe, in 1952. And she was absolutely devastated. It was just really hard on her. And what she wanted to do was, he was wealthy. She wanted to build a hospital in Sacramento.
Oh.
But that's what she wanted, was a hospital for Sacramento. So she started looking at her funds and things like that, and then she died. And she left a holographic will, which we have, as well as a written will, but it's for her sisters to administrate, the two that are left, Nellie and Gladys. And she said that she wanted this hospital in Savoy. And Nellie and Gladys decided that they would work toward meeting what her sister said. Now you have to realize Nellie got all of her dad's land and stuff when the mom was gone, and it was independently wealthy there. Gladys, whose husband had been killed, was a rancher. She didn't get rid of anything. She ran it all. She was an amazing businesswoman. Bernice, who was just more of just a housewife, is a sweet little Bernice. Wait, I think it's Bernice. No, this is Nellie. There's another one, Bernice, though. But anyway, Bernice didn't do much in the business world. And then there's Gladys at the end, whose husband had died. So Gladys was probably the best crocheter when we look at the details. So her mind was very oriented to counting and numbers, and I think she did a good job. So here we go. What caught me was I came across a page after page of newspaper reports of the challenge to Livingston's Trust. And that's what started it. The Livingston Trust was set up by Ruth, and Robert and Susan challenged it. And it went through court, and it was in court. Robert were the children of Dr. Livingston. And they challenged it. And this is embarrassing that she got this. Bernice, because one of the things that really struck me, oh, this is a picture too that's kind of fun. This is Dr. Livingston and Ruth. And there are very few pictures. And the hardest sister to find a picture of is Gladys. Cannot find them. But there were all these challenges to the will, and I'm going to put it out so in the end, what happened was the court sided with the sisters, not with the son and the daughter. The daughter was left $1, the son was left $5,000. I think that's the way it was. So this is Gladys. And the thing that was interesting was that Gladys and Nellie, who are now running the estate, had I thought, especially Nellie, because this is all addressed to her, such little compassion for those children. Okay. So Ruth left, and she had left the house and everything to her sisters. So this is what Robert asked for. The library set, including chairs and settee. 2 old muskets, 1 carbine, flintlocks. He also asked concerning his father's diamond ring. He said, it says effects, household effects. He would like things to remember his dad from. And they had said no. So brought Mark Durley, or attorney. They were different in those days, I think. Anyway, he wrote this out exactly what Robert wanted. This is an original copy. It's not a copy photograph, but this is an original copy of what he had asked for. A very reasonable thing. And I think what ended happening, because there's no correspondence after this related to this, I think they gave it to him, which they should have. But he shouldn't have had to go to court or to an attorney to try to get it. That was kind of sad. So anyway, these court battles, I was reading about them, and Nellie spent the remaining 15 years or so of her life regarding her investment portfolio, which we have a copy of, and it's substantial. Oil, gas, not just the county, other big things. And she did their own, and she had what do they call it? An accountant who would be sending her regular updates on everything that she had, and it's 2 pages double-sided. A lot of stuff. The old Daily home was bulldozed, which was kind of sad. And we have, after she sold the family farm to developers, she worked with Todd Durley, and they were in constant correspondence about all of her problems, and he was like a mother confessor for her. Gladys. Gladys is described as a quiet, private person who cared a great deal for Ventura County. And this is an early picture of Gladys, one of the few that I have, and it's not that great. But this is her actual obituary. She was 97, and it's the picture. Wait a minute, I think I have another picture too that might be better. It's hard to find pictures of Gladys, and she was just a very private person, especially after her accident, and but brilliant.
Was she crippled in the accident?
No, she walked and everything. She did. She just became more of a hermit. That just was what she did. She pulled herself back from society and just ran the ranch and Ruth Daly's Livingston's desires. So I have to read this because I can't get it all straight. In 1954, she worked with Charles M. Hare, doctor, and Ben Nordman, attorney, to set up a foundation to oversee the funds of the ladies. Up until 2014, more than $21 million had been given to local charities. Laura McAvoy is a trustee and executor of Gladys' will. Gladys died in 1998 and seems to have worked very hard to ensure the wishes of Ruth. It was the last piece of land that was sold was in 2014, which all went to this foundation that she set up. So they established what we now know as the Livingston Memorial Foundation. Livingston Visiting Nurses, serving the county.
Oh, that's
Nobody knows that. It's not because of Livingston, it's because of these ladies, especially Gladys. And that's because she was the last and because she was a little kinder than Nellie. That's my opinion. So the Livingston Memorial Foundation benefited, but 20% of the $21 million went to the Heart Association, the local American Cancer Society, the American Diabetes Association, and the ALS Association. The Livingston Visiting Nurses are throughout the county, and the money that funds them is started by these ladies.
Who owns that?
It's a foundation, nobody owns it. It's all a foundation. Yeah, that's what it is.
What was the big hang-up with the Sunless Hospital?
Part of it, there wasn't a lot of reference to that, but I think what evolved, because you have to remember the 1950 is when Ruth died and when she wanted that hospital in Saticoy. But as time went on, St. John's went from number 1 to number 2 to number 3. And we have pictures of William Reinhardt. He was part of all of the building of the St. John's hospitals and the building up of them. Interestingly enough, too, that these ladies were all raised as absolute solid Methodists. And yes, they're pillars of the Methodist Church in Camarillo, because that's what the EW was. And I think Livingston was Catholic. He was very involved with the Catholic programs anyway, and she was fine with that. Ruth was. I don't know anything about Raymer, but they were raised as solid Methodists. I also it struck me as look what you can do if you crochet. You can just, look at what you can become. But that's how I started knowing them, with boxes of crochet and these little tiny articles. So this information is from their letters, from the articles that were written at the time, not from somebody's interpretation of what was then. And so we were able to garner information that is nowhere else. It doesn't exist. And no children to watch over them, but they're watched over. And they are given credit. People are just amazed. We had a display of their crocheting and then the story of the ladies, and they were just like, yeah. So that's why I call them impossible ladies. Thank you. Yes, questions? Yes.
That interesting hat Nellie's wearing, it must have been planned. Do you have any idea of what kind of a message she was trying to send?
Who?
Nellie with the hat.
Oh, with the hat?
That couldn't have been just,
You know what?
She thought it looked good.
Yeah,
that had to be planned.
the thing about that hat, I just think that's such a role.
I don't get
But the thing about it is, I don't think that Nellie realized it was that bad. And so this is a second picture that we have of her, and she stepped to the side a little. But I just think the other one is a crack up. I think the message could be there, actually, because she certainly did not enjoy marriage at all.
Maybe she just wanted to be noticed.
I
Well,
guess.
she thought it was good.
Well, she's a little bit of a thing, actually. All the women were on the smaller side, but they were raised to be such confident women by their dad that I think that impacted them through their life. So thank you. Yes.
I just want to know, is that barn on your shirt from a double Henry Orange?
Yeah, it's the barn.
Oh, the barn. Yes, yes, it is. It's from the old hymn. Yes. Which was moved. Yes.
Is there any connection between our former supervisor, John Flynn?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh, yeah, the Flynns are the Flynns, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And the Flynns were just, they are throughout the family. The first Flynn was in 1898, and he was one of the first supervisors for the county period. He was Judge Flynn, and the Flynns, they all were Irish Catholics, and they're everywhere, and they intermarried with Florchards and Mulharts and everyone. And so Adele, the first Adele, was Catholic, but she married James, and James was a Flynn, and theoretically was a conservative Catholic, but it didn't carry very far. Yeah.
Any of you wanting to go on the lighthouse tour, you can just step out the door and I'll call for the band to come pick you up.
How long is
Do we
that
have to
tour?
sign up? We don't have to sign up.
You know, I know it takes time to get over there, and then when you go in there, less than that. It just depends on how long you want to stay in the lighthouse with the dust, okay?
But you get to go all the way to the top of the lighthouse, so
Okay.
it's totally worth it.
And what I'd like to do is Joy, I'd like to present you with this from the mining. I'd like to remind everybody to, let's see, I don't know what I want to remind you of.
Yes.
There is a Friends of the Bar dinner that'll be in September where you can visit and have a docent tour, but that's not free. Okay, and I have the information over here. I think it's $25 for the docent tour and $45 the docent tour and dinner. And it's on a Friday evening, and I think the dinner's at 6:30. So here, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Yeah, also, we are looking to get more members to become part of the Friends of the Barn organization. And there's some benefits that are attached to it, but more importantly, become a part of preservation of history of the Barn family and all those wonderful things. And if you're not familiar with the Barn Mansion, it's on the base. so it's kind of tricky to get out there, but we are looking to get people to a member and participate in the dinners, and it's a really fun, great evening, and I hope y'all can do that at some point. Also, where's Joy?
Like one of these.
Joy is going to be our butterfly milkweed expert consultant, Richard. She has a vast wealth of information about milkweed, and so we need to pick her brain.
In fact, I went to the presentation last week
yeah.
and listened to the 3 speakers.
Yeah.
So,
There's 3 different kinds of milkweed out
right,
there.
right. And what I learned this morning is our milkweed is tropical and sustainable, and so we did the right thing not knowing what we were doing.
Tropical, there's Northern California one, and then there's natural
And
California.
natural, which isn't natural, it's also an import, actually.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Joy. Thank you, everybody. Great.